1. I was 1 year old when my grandma died. I only know stories about her. Like she was there for Mom even though she was adopted and her father didn't want her. How she couldn't take care of my mom, but later when Mom found out that her dad was still alive, she welcomed her with open arms. When I saw her, I was in middle school. Well, I was going to start middle school, for the record. That very night, my dad was in an ambulance going to hospital. I have really bad anxiety, and at that moment, I wasn't taking meds to calm myself down, so it was really bad. Given the fact that my dad is, to this day, very sick, I was too scared to go with my mom. She couldn't get a babysitter, and told me if I needed anything to go to the neighbors. I was old enough to be on my own, and it was time for bed anyways. I'm not one to cry in front of people, which is why I burst into tears as soon as they left. I went to my room, my comfort place for many years, and held onto a teddy bear. I put the blankets over me but was still awake. I was sobbing at this point, so hard that I couldn't really move. At this point, it had to be late at night because I was exhausted, but still the tears won't stop. It was at this moment I felt a hand on my shoulder. It was rather cold, as the room seemed to drop in temperature. Of course I thought it was weird, but I didn't want to see what was going on. I heard a voice that surprised me. I didn't know who it was, but it sounded rather like an older woman, like my grandma, but not her. It was sweet and comforting. "It's going to be okay, sweetie, I promise," she whispered, and it was quiet. 1, I was home alone and the front door was locked. 2, I had animals at the time, I think a dog named Daisy. She would have barked if someone came in. 3, I didn't recognize the voice, but at the same time I did. Of course this confused me, and when I told my mom the next day, she was a little confused, but said, "Maybe it's your great-grandma," she mumbled. To this day, I never really heard that voice again, even after my grandpa died of lung cancer later. But that voice is with me, and not something I made up. I didn't even believe in ghosts back then. I'm 26 years old now, and though my dad has gotten worse, and really bad things happen in my life, those words always stuck with me. So maybe my great-grandma is my guardian angel, or maybe it was something else. I have no idea, but thought I might share it. 2. I am Dutch, a man, 24. About 5 years ago, I went to see a girl who lived in a nearby village. After spending the evening with her, I had to take the last train home at about 1 a.m. While walking to the train station, the night seemed kinda off somehow. It was too light, the sky a greenish color, no wind, cold, and it all seemed too quiet or something. There was also snow on the ground, and a full moon, if I remember correct. So the train station was on an elevated platform, 2 tracks open, but roofs on both sides. When I got there, I walked up the stairs and noticed I was the only one there. I had to wait like 10 minutes, so I smoked a cigarette and played on my phone. Suddenly I hear this strange whistle in the sky. It consisted of a melody of 4 slow tones. I can't really explain, so I looked down to see if maybe someone was walking their dog and whistling, but I saw no one there. I wasn't alarmed, just thought it was strange. Suddenly I hear the train in the distance. Finally, I thought. I looked in its direction. The tracks came through a forest, so there were trees on both sides. The rumbling became louder, but I saw no train. It became even louder, but still no train. I saw movement on the tracks, but no shapes or anything. The trees next to the tracks shook violently, and the rumbling became even louder, too loud. Then it reached the outskirts of the train station. I was standing in the middle. When it reached the station, it took the snow off the roofs and sucked it in, so a shapeless, rumbling snow cloud raced towards me with great speed and then hit me. It almost blew my socks off, and it blew my shirt out of my trousers and my jacket up so my backside got covered with snow. Same with my face and neck. I was instantly frozen. After it hit me, it was gone, the sound and the movement. I stood there completely baffled, and then I heard the sound again. I thought, God, no. But then I saw lights, and it was the real train. I took it home and never went back. Told the guy from my school the next day who lived in the same village. He told me his best friend committed suicide there, so that was kinda creepy. Still, I'm not entirely sure it was something paranormal. It could also be some kind of wind anomaly, I guess. 3. So I have a pit named Belle. She's the sweetest pup you'll ever meet, but she can be disobedient, as we only adopted her 3 months ago, and she has some trust issues. She will try to get away with anything she can, and she's also incredibly smart, so she tends to be able to get things done without a trace. She taught herself to open the drawers in my bedroom without seeing anyone do it before, that kind of smart. Anyways, on to the spooky stuff. We just recently moved into a new apartment. They are cookie-cutter college apartments in a huge complex, and they were built within the last few years, so I doubt there is any history in the building itself. Regardless, as soon as we moved in, Belle didn't seem at ease. Like I said, she is a sweetheart, and never growls or anything, but when we moved in, she would sit in her chair and emit a low growl at nothing. She did this for a few days and then stopped. So aside from that, the second night I stayed here, I heard a huge bang on the wall to my bedroom and a girl screaming. The apartment that is next door and against my bedroom is currently empty, as no one has moved in yet. In addition, I go to sleep before my boyfriend, so I often can hear him coming up the stairs to our room, and will get excited to greet him. There have been multiple times where I was sure he was coming up the stairs, and I will wake up and anticipate him coming in. But he doesn't. Now back to Belle. She is smart, but some of these things seem improbable. She loves to drink toilet water, so we always shut the door to the bathroom. But we often find her in there drinking water. We have put bread on top of the fridge, and after walking away for 30 seconds, Belle has it on the ground and is eating it. Belle was never able to do these things on her own in our old apartment. But the best part of the whole thing is our front door. We have come downstairs many times to the door opened by itself. We thought there was something up with the latch and never really looked more into it. Well, 2 days ago, me and Belle were cuddling in our chair when the front door swings open. Belle starts to emit that low growl. I get up and close it, thinking again that maybe the latch was weird and the wind blew it open. I make sure it's latched this time though, and tug on it and push it. It can't be opened unless you use the handle. So then I leave Belle downstairs and run to my room real quick to grab something. I'm gone literally for a max of probably 30 seconds. I come down and the door is wide open. Belle is nowhere to be seen. I start to freak out because Belle is known to run off and she doesn't love strangers. Plus she's a pit, and people around here tend to freak out when they see a pit running around off leash. Thank God she's only sniffing something about 20 feet away from the door, so I'm able to wrangle her back in. I go to the door from the outside and push on it, pull on it. Nothing will make the door budge until I open it using the handle. Belle now hangs out by the door as if someone is about to let her out. She previously only did that when my boyfriend or I were about to open the door. If it is a spirit, and Belle isn't just ridiculously smart for a dog, then I think they may like her and be doing little favors for her so she can get into more mischief. But I'm also concerned because I don't want to be having to keep an eye on her 24/7 to make sure she doesn't escape out the front door. What can I do? 4. When I was around 8 years old, I met my first 3 friends who moved to the neighborhood which we have lived in for the past 20 years. The circumstances of them moving to the neighborhood was loosely told to me growing up by them, but as they were kids at the time, they didn't really remember what exactly happened. A couple of months ago, I was at a friend's house and we were talking about paranormal activity we have experienced. That was when my friend's mother sat down and told me in detail what happened in their old home, which made them move to the neighborhood. I knew it was crazy, but I didn't expect to hear what I did. I will try my best to detail all the things she told me. This all took place in the early 1980s. As a young couple with a baby, they were looking for a council house. A council house is a form of public or social housing built by local municipalities in the United Kingdom. around the Nottingham area. They came across a neighbourhood which they wanted to live in, and looked around at the properties there. They were then informed of a house in that area which had become available. When they went to visit the house, they noticed that the door to the basement had been bricked up. The other houses in that area all had access to their basements. They thought it was odd, but nevertheless, nothing concerning. From what I was told, the first couple of years which they lived in the house, nothing happened. It was just a normal house. The father was still studying electric engineering, and the mother was a housewife. By this time, they had 2 more children. Later on, one of the neighbors who frequently visited the house told the mother that she had sensed a bad spirit in the house, and they should get the house blessed. They didn't do so when they first moved in. My friend's mother agreed, but told me she regretted it deeply, as all hell broke loose after that. She thought the events that transpired were caused by the blessing. The first thing which started to happen was my friend, who was the oldest at the time, started to become restless at night and complained that something was scaring him. My friend's mom thought it was just normal, as he had just moved into his own room for the first time. But this started to become a daily routine, and she started to worry about him. It became that bad that he refused to sleep by himself. He said he saw a black woman with long fingers and frizzy hair in his room. Eventually, all 3 brothers would sleep in the same room. Later, they started to hear scratching and knocking noises in the house. The way she described the noises was like ticking on the windows and scratching noises in the corner of the rooms. This would last for minutes. She couldn't understand exactly where the noises were coming from. As the months went along, things became increasingly strange. She told me how they started to smell rotten flesh throughout the house, and then it would just suddenly disappear. My friends, who were the oldest and youngest, were the ones who were greatly affected by the events in the house. The middle child had become attached to the spirit. He would frequently play by himself and talk to the spirit when his brothers weren't around. Later on, the father started to become a target. My friend's mom told me how there was an instance where he punished the 3 boys, and especially the middle child, for doing something wrong. Later that night, he had a dream of getting chased by a demon dog which ended up biting him. He woke up the next day with giant bite marks on his chest. One of the most frightening things which she told me was that at night she felt that something was standing near the windowsill, and then it would jump on the bed and then jump back on the windowsill. She would get up and start to pray as the bed was shaking, and it would eventually stop. They would also start to hear sinister laughing throughout the house, as if something demonic was taunting them. There were also instances where she saw paw prints on the kitchen floor, as if a dog had been walking around. Only problem was, they didn't have a dog. They asked one of their uncles to house sit for them as they took the 3 kids for a day out. They wanted to get their minds off of the events and have a normal day for a change. The uncle was told of what was happening in the house, but he was a skeptic. He said he would deal with what was in the house himself while they were gone. Later that night, when they arrived home, they were shocked to discover the front door wide open and all the lights in the house on. They phoned the uncle and asked him where he was. He told them that he challenged the spirit in the house and was thrown across the room. He started to hear laughing, at which point he ran out the door. As you can imagine, things became very desperate, so they contacted the local council and informed them of what was happening in the house. Eventually, a woman from the council came to visit their home to reassure them that they would do something to make it better. My friend's mother later learned that the woman who came to visit ended up in hospital with a mysterious illness, and later refused to go anywhere near that house again. The meetings which they had subsequently all took place in a pub which was a half-mile down the road. Thankfully, the council found them another house, on the street where we live now. On the last day, when they were packing their things into the car to move out, the middle son was walking in the house by himself, without a care for anything. He was the only one who didn't want to move. The family later learned that numerous couples had left the house after their departure. No one stayed in the house for more than a few months. After doing some research, they were informed by local people that a black woman with a dog had committed suicide in that house. From what I understand, the house is now part of a Chinese takeaway. 5. You may take my story with a grain of salt, but it doesn't really bother me because I've stopped caring a long time ago. My purpose here is to share my experiences and not have them in your faces, should you raise the eyebrow of skepticism. I won't reveal my place of residence for personal reasons, but in summary, I am a Caucasian male, neither too old nor too young, and pretty normcore. Perhaps the saddest part about my childhood is that no matter how many times we moved out, and where, the apartments always seemed to be haunted. Hence why I developed a severe case of nicotophobia at a young age that persists until now. So because I was unfortunate enough to experience many paranormal phenomena at home whilst growing up, seeing shadow people being slapped across the face, spanked while lying down on my belly, someone trying to lift up my duvet, feeling a cold hand tightening around my ankle, etc., etc., I ended up being programmed to think that inside at night equals bad, outside at night equals safe or nothing much. To begin, I'm part of a night working team. We work in a massive construction site situated within an even larger university campus. Part of it is where active student and teacher life is. The other side is a few miles or kilometers of barren land that comprises numerous abandoned buildings that were supposed to be faculties and departments. Over the years, many of them were built halfway through and then deserted, probably because the project was deemed a failure, or the guy in charge of it went bankrupt and shit. As a result, they have no doors or windows. You just see tall buildings with several stories of utter darkness. Hell, some workers even go in and defecate on the floor when the restroom is taken. Frankly, it's like being in a ghost town located in the suburb of a metropolis. You have to literally walk miles to get back on the main road where civilization is. Shops, busy roads, people going on about their business. Recently, though, some higher-ups want to renew this deserted area. I guess it has to do with upholding the reputation of the school, so there are people working day and night. And since there's an abandoned gym somewhere near the area where we work, I thought it was very convenient for me to finish my job as quickly as possible and then go lift some weights with my buddies just because it's free. I must point out that I never liked going there alone. The first time I did so was in plain day, before I got transferred to my current group. It was out of curiosity, really. I noticed that most of the equipments were still usable, so I timidly took 8-kilogram dumbbells, 17 pounds, and started lifting half-assedly, which is understandable, since I had never done any lifting before. Not 5 minutes went by, and I heard as clear as day somebody clearing his throat in the room. The tone implied that I was being mocked, like somebody who doesn't want to be disrespectful letting out an while suppressing an obvious smile. It gave me that vibe, anyway. Weeks later, I was bored out of my mind and decided I'd take a walk. There's nothing fun about watching your co-workers dig a hole in the ground. It's noisy and you're tired as hell. I'm mainly tasked with carrying metal bars and dusty bags of cement, so there isn't much to do after that. I went with a guy I secretly disliked because of his bossy attitude. He was free and offered to take a quick walk with me, to which I consented. We were talking rather awkwardly about life and all that cheesy pseudo-philosophical stuff plebs, including myself, think makes them sound deep and wise. That's when I realized that we'd strayed away further than I had intended. But I didn't really mind at the time because I felt like I was in the middle of a young bromance. Soon afterwards, Adam excused himself and went to take a leak in the bushes. I stood there like an idiot, and believe it or not, moments earlier, before we got to that point, we kept hearing pebbles rolling on the floor. The first and second time, we simply brushed it off. But when it kept on happening every now and then, we knew something was wrong. I felt like we were being stalked, and I could see on Adam's face that he was aware of this. but we didn't say anything to each other because we were two men with a masculinity complex, trying not to be a laughingstock. So like I said, he's peeing in the bushes and I'm standing awkwardly, trying to give him privacy by pretending to be mesmerized by our mysterious surroundings. Right then, right there, a rock the size of your average PC mouse shattered by my feet and I cursed in panic. When I was a teen, drunkards in my neighborhoods would play the same trick by throwing glass bottles at us from their window, when we'd form a gang and talk throughout the night. This was usually near a 20-plus floor building, so it was extremely hard to pinpoint where the projectile came from. However, with a 6-story building, I had no problem scanning it immediately, since it was small by my standards. That's when I spotted something unusual. On the 3rd floor was a dark silhouette, and by dark I mean really dark. It was already past evening, and obviously these uninhabited buildings have no lights or windows whatsoever, but I was still able to see it. The thing stood still. I had to squint hard to see if my imagination was getting ahead of myself. But the longer I did so, the more I realized there was something abnormal about it. I forgot to mention that as I was squinting and frowning, I had goosebumps all over, as if I knew that I was being blatantly disrespectful for some reason. Right when my eyes finally adjusted to it, I realized that it was actually a hooded figure. Very typical from what I've been reading here. I'm a long-time lurker, but that's all I can say about it. I could tell it was a man, judging by his height and large frame. Actually, the striking thing about this shadow was that it was tall to such a point that the pelvis area seemed to be above the edge of the window, whatever you call it. I called Adam pretty nervously, doing my best to sound manly, and gestured with my arm for him to come over, all the while keeping my eyes fixated on the entity. Because one rule of the paranormal is that the moment you take your eyes off something, it disappears completely, and then you're standing there looking like a complete idiot when people finally show up to ask what happened. It's pretty frustrating when nobody believes you in these kind of situations, which is why I was happy I had another witness with me. Adam quickly came over and asked what was up. I told him to look at the 3rd floor. It took him a good 10 seconds before he muttered, "Shit." I'm not sure what we were doing at the time, but we took a few steps closer to the building, just to make sure that what we were seeing was indeed a person, even though deep down I already knew what we were dealing with. You know when people shield their eyes with their hand when they're trying to get a better look on a sunny day? The shadow man was doing the exact same thing while looking at us. He just kept getting more visible the longer I looked at him. By the way, before I go further, I just want to say that demons love trolling. What they do to us in terms of house scares and other paranormal stuff, whatever that may be, is the equivalent of YouTube pranks and social experiments. Except that they don't laugh it off and tell you, "Hey, it's just a prank, bro." The problem is that when they don't disappear and remain there for longer than your average demon, or ghost if you believe in those things, then it's obvious that they're up to no good, because that's a bold and unusual move. The hooded figure disappeared. We didn't see it move, but it's more like it dissolved into the darkness. By that point, we thought it was completely gone, or perhaps we were really hallucinating. After a moment of silence, I told Adam that we should probably get going. Right when I turned around, he yelled and muttered something which gave me a jump scare. I saw him backing away fearfully. The building had neither door nor window, as I mentioned earlier, and the tall figure was now standing at the entrance and still looking at us. Somehow the air around us started to become tense, and I mean you could physically feel the change. Me and Adam were standing under a giant light pole, which started to flicker. I guess demons and static electricity go hand in hand. I could never understand that. But if some of you have an explanation for this, I'd be glad to read it, since it's something I've noticed in my childhood. What we found ourselves looking at was indeed a tall, hooded figure, wrapped in a large robe who stood perfectly straight, without making the tiniest movement. He looked stiff and made of plastic, It was akin to staring at a mannequin in a clothing store. He seemed unreal and yet very much alive. The fabric of his dress had a texture similar to that of a black trash bag. If any of you is familiar with Bleach, sometimes Zangetsu's rags quietly glide in the air despite him being immobile in a non-windy area. Me, being a retard, thought demons were trolls or pussies. I thought to myself, hey, it might be a crazy druggie after all. But quickly brushed the thought away. Then, and I kid you not, the shadow figure crouched like it was suffering from a bad stomach, and then sprinted at full speed towards us. All we did was scream in a high-pitched voice, while trying to remember where we had come from. I tell you, in that moment of sheer panic, it was difficult not to run in random directions, away from the main road, just because it felt like we were too slow running in a straight line. I could clearly see the hooded figure chasing us. Adam was running adjacent to me, crying. I thought that if I stopped noticing it, it would disappear. But I was even more teary-eyed because I sensed that it showed no sign of giving up, and I felt someone pinching the area under my buttocks before I cried too and soiled my boxers with a good amount of piss. My bladder gave just like that. When we reached the busy site again, those who were taking a short break noticed us, but didn't flinch. Maybe because to them it looked like we were just having a friendly race to see who's faster, until they got a look at our faces. Obviously we told them about what we had seen. Some looked genuinely concerned, while others feigned that expression. After the incident, I became extremely paranoid. Forget about sleeping with the lights on. I couldn't sleep alone at all. Sometimes I slept at a friend's house. Other times I asked some of them to come spend the night at my place. I could see in their eyes that my happy proposal was more akin to begging. It really was. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to 5 True Paranormal Stories, episode 68. Thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. You know, that last story there, mentioning the abandoned buildings, it got me thinking about all the abandoned exploration videos I've been watching on YouTube right now. Interesting stuff, not something I'd want to do myself, but I'm certainly very happy to watch other people do it. At least the right kind of people. So I've seen some videos where I've turned them off fairly quickly because, well, quite frankly, the people doing it were disrespectful jerks is what they were. But I've watched others where they're generally quite respectful, and like people like the Proper People, that channel there, they're quite good. Let me think, there's others as well. Have a look here at my watch history. Oh yeah, there's exploring with Rick and Becca. It's a young couple that seem to go doing it. They're quite good. Again, quite respectful. They're just having a look around. They're clearly not taking anything. There's a few others as well. I think there's Bright Films. Explore with Us. They seem alright. Hell on Earth. Yeah, I think they weren't bad. And well, there's lots and lots of them out there. They're getting to be kind of like to be like scary narration channels, to be honest with you. So I'm sure there'll be more in the future. Okay, and with that, I'm going to head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.